Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Well, welcome back to our continued discussion on the Maha-Satipatthana Sutta, which originally I'd laid out to be 7 weeks, but we're having such a good time. It's going to be more weeks than 7, and I think it's going well. So I'm glad to have you all here. And I hope today turns into a lot of introspection and discussion. And I want to reiterate again that the way that I hope this is working for anybody who watches it is that you're able to look at this deeply for yourself, because there's no authority in me that is, or, you know, even if I were a fully enlightened being, it wouldn't do you any good. You have to look in you. So this should be a journey of self-introspection. That's the idea. And today we're picking up with mental qualities. I'm going to share my screen and the sutta where we left off. And last week we finished discussing mind. And we looked at restricted mind and enlarged mind, and surpassed and unsurpassed mind, and concentrated and not concentrated. And as always, we reiterate, we notice how these things, the phenomena, come and go, and how they originate and pass away. And that there is a mind, at least that we can see, that there is this thing for knowledge and remembrance. And today things shift a little bit. And this is a subtle shift, but you remember I was saying that, like, we move on like a roller coaster. We come to the top here, and now we're getting ready to move into the fourth foundation of mindfulness, mental qualities, or sometimes phenomena. And so when we look at these mental qualities, we're going to start with this one, which for me, has been a real cornerstone of understanding Buddhism. And that's the 5 hindrances. So there's the case where a monk remains focused on mental qualities in and of themselves with reference to the 5 hindrances. And how does a monk remain focused on the qualities in and of themselves? There's the case where there is being sensual desire present within the monk. They discern there is sensual desire present within me. Or being no sensual desire, they discern there is no sensual desire. And it discerns how there is a rising of unarisen sensual desire. And he discerns how the abandoning of sensual desire, once it has arisen. And he discerns how there is no future arising of sensual desire, that once it has been abandoned. And then this says, the formula repeats as necessary for the remaining hindrances: ill will, sloth and drowsiness, restlessness, anxiety, and then certainty. This is a perfect example of why we're slowing this down. There's a lot to unpack here. So let's take a look at that together. I've changed that up a little bit. So let's talk about the 5 hindrances. Everybody seeing this presentation? Yeah. So the Pali word, Nīvaraṇa, the prefix meaning down, out, or away, and the root meaning to cover, hinder, or obstruct. Thus, Nīvaraṇa essentially refers to something that obstructs or hinders progress. In the context of Buddhist practice, Nīvaraṇas are mental obstructions that hinder one's spiritual development and the path to enlightenment. These hindrances cover or obscure the clarity of mind, preventing the attainment of deeper states of concentration and insight. So we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that what we're doing here is we're following the directions the Buddha himself laid out for meditation practice. I'm going to stop sharing long enough to just kind of talk. You know, we start at the top of this and he says, this is the path to purification. And as we progress through the Maha-Satipatthana Sutta, we're going to examine the 4 Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path at the end. But the point here being, we've been following for weeks small recommendations for practice to refine the way you look at what you see. And whether that's internally or externally, or both internally and externally, and noticing how some of these things change. So this is a recommendation on how to refine your practice. And here we get to the place where he says, and this is why you're having trouble reaching those jhana states. This is why you're having trouble with those deep states of concentration. This is why you're having trouble seeing clearly. So I'm going to share again, and we're going to go through this just a little bit at a time. I love this piece of artwork, and it's not mine. And I, before I ever upload this on YouTube, I have to make contact with this artist and get permission, because it's just perfect as far as I'm concerned. So what we see here is the 5 hindrances. The first is sensual desire. The craving for pleasure ties the mind to temporal, unsatisfactory experiences, leading it away from understanding the impermanent nature of phenomena. So this is the first one, and it's depicted here in this picture as craving delicious food. And we crave stuff to make us feel better. We want sensual desires, and some of those things can be just warmth and comfort and cup hot chocolate on a snowy day. It can be a relationship that includes sex and sexuality, because that sensual desire drives you too. So there's craving to what we experience with our senses. There's ill will, and we've seen this ill will. We all well familiar with, probably. Aversion and hostility cloud the mind, preventing the cultivation of loving kindness and compassion. So again, as we look at this, as we examine it this way, we see how when we have ill will, it's very hard for us to act with a compassionate heart. And so cultivating a state outside of ill will. Sloth and torpor, or laziness and dullness. So the state of lethargy and drowsiness dulls the mind, making it difficult to maintain mindfulness and alertness. And anyone who's ever done a retreat knows that this happens at 1 o'clock, right after lunch, when you go back to practice. It can be very challenging after you've eaten a big meal to keep your energy up like that. Restlessness and remorse. So this is agitation, worry, scatter the mind's focus. Remember, we talked about scattered mind last time, hindering concentration and tranquility. So as long as you're worried, you're not tranquil, right? And so here we have anxiety and worry. That, like, isn't this like the biggest, and depression for that matter? These mental states that wash over us, that those are a hindrance to our practice. And doubt or skepticism about the teachings, one's own abilities, or the path itself paralyzes progress, fostering indecision and lack of commitment. Imagine that you've gone past these states and you've seen a deep state of concentration, and you know that it's there and it exists because you've experienced it. Then your doubt would be expelled, wouldn't it? So the doubt can't be there to get there, but if you know that the water runs downhill, it doesn't surprise you to see water running downhill. And so doubt is one of these things that hinders our progress. So let's think about this a little bit when we're just looking at these hindrances to practice, these hindrances to this different way of being, and think about the other stuff that we studied a little bit, because we studied the body. And certainly there's sensual desire with the body, because we want the body to feel good. We want to have good experiences, and that's a good place where that starts. But there's feelings. We look at the nature of feelings that feel pleasurable or non-pleasurable or neutral, and feelings, experiences of the mind that are full of ill will, the poisons. We've looked at those things, full of ill will, desire, and confusion. And so we can see how that these states in our practice, or these states of mental qualities, actually point to the other parts that we've been studying. This all starts to come together, and we start to see, when I'm full of ill will, I really can't experience the depth of metta, or loving kindness. So what I want to do is I want to open this up to a little bit of group practice and exercise. So I'm just going to walk us through this one step at a time. that part in the paragraph. I've slowed these down from the sutta. And I'm going to walk through this for each one of these 5 hindrances. And here's what I would invite. I would invite you to take this as a practice, to close your eyes and just hear what I'm saying and think about this experience. What is it like when this happens? Is it present in you now? Those kinds of things. We're just going to make that observation. So there is the case where there being sensual desire present within, a monk discerns there is sensual desire present within me. So is there sensual desire present within you right now? Or there being no sensual desire present within, he discerns there is no sensual desire present within me. Are you currently free from sensual desire? He discerns how there is a rising of unarisen sensual desire. Think about that a minute. How is there a rising of unarisen sensual desire? And he discerns how there is abandoning of sensual desire once it has arisen. If you have sensual desire, how can you let it go? And he discerns how there is no future arising of sensual desire once it has been abandoned. What would it be like to have abandoned sensual desire? There's the case where there being ill will present within, a monk discerns that there is ill will present within me. Or, being no ill present within, he discerns there is no ill will present within me. Is there ill will present within you now for anybody or anything? For yourself? Maybe somebody you have a conflict with? Is there even a subtle amount of ill will? He discerns how there is a rising of unarisen ill will. I think we can understand how that happens, that there can be ill will arising in us, and there are conditions that will make it so. He discerns how the abandoning of ill will once it has arisen. What would it feel like to let go of ill will? And if you're experiencing ill will right now, can you let it go? And he discerns how in the future there can be no arising of ill will once it was abandoned. What would it be like to have completely abandoned the practice of ill will? There's the case where there being sensual desire present within, a monk discerns, oh, I'm sorry, this is a mistake. There's the case where there's sloth and drowsiness present within, and a monk discerns there's sloth and drowsiness present within me. Or there being no sloth and drowsiness present within me, he discerns there is no sloth and drowsiness present within me. So what's it feel like when it's the opposite of sleepiness and drowsiness? It's energy, ardency. He discerns how there is the arising of unarisen sloth and drowsiness. So if you're on practice on retreat, how does drowsiness arise? And he discerns how there is no future arising of sloth and drowsiness once it's been abandoned. Can we imagine what it would be like to have abandoned sloth and drowsiness? Once abandoned, what would that mean? There's the case where restlessness and anxiety are present within, and a monk discerns there's restlessness and anxiety present within me. Or there's being no restlessness and anxiety present within me. He discerns there is no restlessness and anxiety present within me. Has anyone here ever experienced restlessness and anxiety when they were practicing? So if you recognize, if your mindfulness cues and you see that you're experiencing restlessness and anxiety while you're practicing, what can you do about that? He discerns how there is a rising of unarisen restlessness and anxiety. What are the steps that come together when anxiety arises? He discerns that there is an abandoning of restlessness and anxiety once it has arisen. Can you, when you're really worried and tense, look at it and say, wow, I'm really worried and tense, and then abandon that worry and tension? Just drop it and let it go. And if you do, what's there instead? And he discerns how there could be a future where a rising of restlessness and anxiety has been abandoned. Like it doesn't happen because the steps don't come together, because you've let it go. There's the case where doubt and uncertainty are present within the monk, and they discern there is doubt and uncertainty present within me. Or there being no doubt and uncertainty present within, they discern that there is no doubt and uncertainty present within me. Doubt and uncertainty often presents like distraction. Like I would be doing this if I was certain it was going to get me to jhana, but I'm not sure because I don't think I have enough time. So maybe I ought to go get a snack instead. Maybe this other thing is something I should do instead because meditation doesn't really work for me all the time. That's doubt and uncertainty. What causes a rising of doubt and uncertainty, particularly speaking about your practice? And when you discern that there is doubt and uncertainty present, how can you abandon it? And is it possible to exist without doubt and uncertainty? So you can see here, as we've broken down that paragraph, which we glanced over at the beginning, it was just really condensed in the sutta and difficult to see. There's a profound thing being explained here. That if you really look at your body and your feelings and your mind, you're going to notice that some conditions come together which are not helpful, and they're not where you want to be. It doesn't feel good to be full of ill will. It doesn't feel good to be full of laziness and drowsiness. And it's not just that it doesn't feel good, it's also that it just isn't beneficial. It doesn't have to feel good. Equanimity can feel not perfectly good, but still super beneficial. The 5 hindrances can be explained this way too. I've heard this explained where it's compared to a glass of water. And clear meditation is like a clear, cool glass of water that is still. Ill will is like boiling water, hot, full of energy, gonna burn you if you touch it. Sloth and torpor are like muddy water or slimy, moldy water. It's cloudy and gross and doesn't feel good. Restlessness and remorse are like wind rattling the water and stirring it up, and causing all this chaos. And there's just nothing actually to it, but the chaos shows up. Like a nice still pond stirred by wind. It's still a pond, it's still water, it's just stirred. There's doubt, which is like water in a dark place. So the water may be crystal clear, but you still can't see it because you're clouded with doubt. And colored water, or full of sensory desire. Ooh, maybe if I got some blue and put it in my water, it'd look extra pretty and I'd like it extra. Maybe if I add a little sugar to my water, it'll taste a little sweet. So today we examine these states of being that we can see clearly in our meditation practice that lay out kind of a real differentiation between two different states. A well-practiced state that is full of energy, vibrance, joy, and a state that is held down, defiled, and messed up from that. It's full of poisons and difficulty and turmoil. And here, the recommendation becomes you cultivate a different way of being. You cultivate that by letting go, by seeing what causes these to arise, by abandoning its causes, by seeing that this is something worth developing. So we stop just noticing, wow, life sucks a lot. And we start saying, but there is another way. And that's really important. Because if it was just that we were going to observe the pain and the turmoil and the dismay and the dukkha in our life, then that'd be terrible. That'd not a positive message. But there's a positive message here. And it's truly positive because it's found right within you. You're capable of doing something about it. It can be available to everyone and doesn't require anything special. You can just look deeply and see it. So, a lot of things to think about there today as we look at this one paragraph nestled in the middle of the sutta. And we turn the corner from how can we just observe these phenomena that happen in life and see them, and instead cultivate something new and different. With that, I'll conclude for today and open up for any discussion, questions, and thoughts that everybody has. A lot of introspection. I'm going to take that as a good sign. Vicki, you got any thoughts?
I always have thoughts. Come when they go. In general, as you were teaching this, I would come and go with a thought that came and went a lot. Okay, is yes, I experience the defilements. Yes, I find moments that I'm freer and calmer. Okay, the concept of and I may not be understanding it right, but the concept of being free of it for good or forever or always is where then the doubt part comes in. It's hard to imagine that.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah.
Does that make, I don't know.
No, it makes perfect sense. In fact, I remember once I was reading I don't remember where I saw it, but I think it was in like a Tricycle magazine or some article where somebody referred to as the translation of what happened when the Buddha achieved enlightenment is that he came to realize that his suffering had ended. Like, not that it could end this way, or that he'd get there if he tried this, or that system works, so he'd stop doing this. But that one day it occurred to him that once he'd had this full epiphany, that those things didn't happen anymore. Like, it didn't arise. Like, that's the promise. And that is profound. That's the profound promise of Nibbana, right? And so, in looking at this, I'm going to share my screen again just really quick. Go back to the start of this Nīvaraṇa. And looking at Ni, the out, down, or away, and struck by the difference between Nīvaraṇa and Nibbana. And Nibbana, which is nirvana, is the Sanskrit term, but here I'm drawing this line. These terms really are not related, but Ni, meaning no, out, or away, Bana means craving, no craving. Nibbana is no craving. That is what the word means. To be without attachment and craving. Nibbana. So a state that we talked about last week, already available. is it already available to you to be without sloth and torpor right now, without laziness and drowsiness? Is that available to you? If you were feeling sleepy during your practice, is it still available to you to get to a state without that? Could you change things? You stand up, go outside, do whatever, right? So it is available to you, the state right now, even if you're experiencing, sleepiness, the state is available. So then you could ask the question, is it possible for me to cultivate not getting sleepy like that? Like we talk about going on retreat, you get sleepy in the afternoon. Is it possible for me to cultivate that? And so then the question becomes, well, in practice, yeah, I think it is possible to say, if I cultivate the right circumstances, so I'm not eating at the wrong time and I'm not, I'm following these rules, then I can raise a lot of energy in my practice, right? But it is kind of, you got to set the intention and do something. And could I get really good at that? Yeah, I think I could get really good at that. So that's an example of something tangible. And maybe we dispel the doubt a little bit by walking through it, by looking at the phenomena. I see how it comes and goes. I see how it arises. I see how I can make it not arise again in the future. So I can see how I can abandon the practice of falling asleep in my meditation if I do that. And if I abandon that, what would that be like? What would my practice be like? And so that's an example that we can all relate to, sleepiness. And what about ill will? I guess a little trickier. How do I abandon ever having ill will again? Well, I guess you never drive on a freeway again, because that's going to create ill will, right? And so some of these things get tricky. But that is kind of the thing. It's like, yet is it possible for me to first recognize that ill will arises in me sometimes? And second, when it arises, learn how to let it go. And then if I learn how to let it go, can I make it not arise in the future again with practice? Yeah, I think so. Linda?
Question. So, these 5 hindrances, these are things that I feel they're really what they happen in our life. And these reactions in a sense are part of, what makes us human. And so we're using the word abandoning here. And the thing that I'm now pondering is that trying to distinguish between abandonment and possible replacement with indifference. That makes sense. It's just as opposed to, it's this isn't affecting me, as opposed to oh well.
I think what you're pointing to is one of the things that we're going to cultivate, and we'll get into in the coming section, is renunciation. Is the idea that it's like you get to the point where it's like my example of the sleepiness, right? At some point, I get to where I'm noticing that I'm indifferent to it, and I notice, yeah, it's not pleasurable, right? We've been studying those things. And then I get to where it's like, okay, so I'm going to renounce that. I don't want that anymore. I don't want to be lazy in the afternoons. I'm not going to eat so much rice when I go for a retreat, right? Like that's it. I renounce eating rice at retreat because it makes me sleepy in the afternoon. And so you become indifferent to the tune of, I think that renunciation starts to develop. You start going, boy, that ill will is not helping me. It's not, I don't like it when ill will arises. I want to renounce that. I don't like it when even the sensual desire. Here I sit, I'm using the examples of retreat. One other example on retreat is in the morning, boy, when you smell that rice cooking and you're hungry. So I'll give a quick little story on that, and I'll use this to kind of conclude. So New Year's Eve came, and you'll recall that I went out and practiced at the Hermitage, sat all night through the night in the forest in meditation. And so when you're practicing 8 precepts, you're not eating after noon. So a long night of practice in the forest is going to make you hungry. And so by the next morning, boy, I was ready for breakfast. And so one of the lay practitioners, he's a real common, person around the Hermitage, came and wanted to make us a special breakfast because we practiced hard. So made us this Cambodian soup. It was special from home, like his mom used to make. It was Cambodian. So it had chunks of coagulated blood in it, which is not in my Western palate. And so there I am, tired, hungry, coming out of the woods, thankful for my soup. And I glance down, and it is not something that's appealing to me. And it's a struggle, right? There you are. You're like, sensual desire arises. But this person came out of their way to make me this loving soup, because I've been practicing her. If I was caught up in my sensual desire about that soup, I would miss that loving kindness. I wouldn't have had that. Renouncing that and eating that soup made my life a better place. So that is a good example. These examples abound, and this is part of monks' life. Why do monks go do what they do? They renounce, they develop a life where they cultivate this. So if you can cultivate even a little bit in your home life, if you can just a little bit less ill will, recognizing that your ill will to that person on the freeway when they cut you off is happening in you, is damaging to you, that you can abandon it, that you can make a world where it doesn't arise, even right there on the freeway. And I'll conclude with that. Anybody else got anything else? I'm happy to answer more questions. Well, then, looks like there's lots of questions. See everybody's face, full of questions. Lots of stuff to ponder. That's good. It's good. That's what we're doing here.
Exactly. That's my thoughts. Lots to ponder.
Yeah.
So I got frozen there. But one of the interesting things about your story is that I was just thinking about my own experience when I was on pilgrimage in Spain, and after a day of wandering through the high desert, going in and then having one of my Irish companions say, "No, you need to eat this." And I was like, I don't know if I can do that.
Yeah.
And it surprisingly, it turned out to be exactly what my body needed. And so even though my mind was like, I don't know, I was like, my body's like, yeah, that's what we need right now.
Yeah. And I don't think I can overstate the significance that like a lot of what this discussion about, the whole reason, it's because you're looking, you're looking in your life, you're seeing it, you're observing deeply. And so this is an active participation in your life rather than a passive, these things just happen to me. It's an active participation. And so that, Chris, like you say, experience years ago, added to your conditions, and changed probably how much you like the Irish dishes.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else? Lena, you look like you want to say something.
No, I'm just pondering quite a bit. I mean, it's interesting when you put it that way. I like your later definition or examples of the renunciation, actually, because renunciation and like that word carries so much loaded religious judgment for me. Mm-hmm. And there's this feeling of behind the word renunciation that's just like, you're doing a bad thing and you should not do that bad thing. But like the reality is, like right now, I'm in a period where I have complete control over my schedule. And I realized, wait, that means I can like make it really work for me. So I've been doing time tracking in half-hour intervals, and I have all of these pages. And I'm like, where was I? Who was I? Like, what kind of impact did this have on my activity level and like some details? So I'm like becoming a scientist of my experience and like that next level way, not just during periods of meditation, but like all day long via the time tracking. And the funny thing is that it naturally is resulting in this kind of like non-judgmental renunciation. Like I'm not saying to myself, I'm like, I'm on this like long-term battle with the habit of having coffee first thing in the morning. I'm trying to have it sometime after I wake up because of reasons we don't need to get into. But, you know, right now, the past few days, after a few days of this time tracking, it's been easier to do just like via the observation of the current habit and its impact on my energy. It's been easier to quote unquote renounce the coffee first thing and instead introduce it an hour or 90 minutes after I wake up. And do so without judging it, if that makes sense.
No, yeah,
There's
yeah, that's
kind
the
of
point.
renunciation, which I think is like a more skillful, gentle renunciation. I don't think like, because when we talk about, okay, I'm going to renounce rice because I'm kind of like just tired of falling asleep in the afternoons. It's a very different energy from I'm going to renounce rice because I'm going to be a more righteous person if I deny myself this rice.
Right. It's not, you know what? I'm just going to go out on a limb here after years of practicing this stuff and going to hermitages and so on and tell you, I don't think you can torture yourself into enlightenment. There are certainly those who try, but I don't think you're going to torture yourself into not suffering. And certainly that is not what the Buddha said. You know, he tried to torture himself better than anybody has. You know, he went through all those things. But it's interesting because the example of, okay, this Indian saint went and didn't eat but a grain of rice and nearly died. That's all very dramatic. But what about just not my morning coffee? What about just not my morning coffee? Like, morning coffee is a thing that pretty universally people can understand. And which one of the hindrances is involved with morning coffee? What do you think? I think it could be the hindrance of sensual desire. I really need that latte. It's creamy. I want it to feel good and so on.
It
But
feels
there's
good.
yeah. But certainly when I'm battling sloth and torpor in my meditation at the hermitage, I'm going to stop and go get a cup of coffee. So that coffee, by going and getting a cup of coffee, raises the energy. It helps me to raise my energy, of course. And so there's always coffee at the hermitage or anywhere there's monks, there's coffee. But there's it's true. But the thing is that it's kind of how we approach it, right? If we approach it as a habit that's going to bring us comfort and we crave it, that's one thing. If we approach it as, this is something that I can do, I can eat right, I can take in a cup of coffee, and then my afternoon practice will be more solid, so I'll have the energy to really look deeply. Like, the relationship to just that cup of coffee is different because one of those is craving and one of those is right action.
It's interesting because the way you say it now makes me feel some of that judgment again. Like, the relationship with the coffee is that you should only have it if you're not enjoying it. You should, you know what I mean? It's like, it's almost like, oh, you should have it if you're trying to battle a hindrance, then it's okay. But like, if you're gonna like really love that coffee, you know, sensual, but it's like, why not fully enjoy the coffee? I'm just choosing to fully enjoy it, ideally, like not the second that I wake up because there's, you know, ATP, blah, blah, blah binding.
So you're examining sensual desire.
Yeah.
And you're examining craving and you're examining, you know, all of those things. That's the practice. What do you see? How do these things arise? What makes us abandon them? And what would it be like if you were one of those monks? Ajahn Brahm doesn't really drink coffee. He just doesn't. It just doesn't come up. So it's never a question. It's never a struggle. It's never a thing. He just doesn't. It's not about enjoy it or don't enjoy it. It's just about, I'm not saying he never does, actually, sometimes with lunch or something. But it's not a significant thing for him. It's not anything that he attaches to in any way. I should do this or shouldn't do this or doesn't attach. So therein lies the thing for us to look at. Is why do these things rise? Where does the attachment come from? What is the result as these phenomena come and go? And we'll continue to do that, continue to practice with that. We've gone a little over for today, but thanks for joining me for the practice. I hope that you all have a good week, and I hope that you have a week free from defilement. And with that said, I will share my screen, and we'll conclude with some reflections on universal well-being. May we abide in well-being, in freedom from affliction, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may we maintain well-being in ourselves. May everyone abide in well-being, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may they maintain well-being in themselves. May all beings be released from all suffering, and may they not be parted from the good fortune they have attained. When they act upon intention, all beings are the owners of their action and inherit its results. Their future is born from such action, companion to such action, and its results will be their home. All actions with intention, be they skillful or harmful, of such acts they will be the heirs. And we'll conclude with salutation to the Trillium Time. Araham sama sambuddho bhagava buddham bhagavantam abhivademi. Sawakato bhagavata dhammo dhammam namasami. Patipanno bhagavato sawaka sangho sangham namami. Hope you all have a great week and look forward to continuing to study with you come next week.